This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Calls are growing for the Senate to call witnesses in President Trump's impeachment trial after the New York Times published details about former National Security Advisor John Bolton's forthcoming book. In an unpublished draft of the book, Bolton writes that President Trump personally told him in August that he wanted to maintain a freeze on $391 million in security assistance to Ukraine until Ukraine turned over materials related to former Vice President Joe Biden and supporters of Hillary Clinton in Ukraine. Bolton sent a draft of the book to the White House for review in December. The Democratic House impeachment managers issued a statement saying, quote, "There can be no doubt now that Mr. Bolton directly contradicts the heart of the president's defense and therefore must be called as a witness at the impeachment trial of President Trump," unquote. The New York Times broke the story Sunday, one day after President Trump's legal team began its defense of the president at the impeachment trial. During Saturday's opening arguments, White House Deputy Counsel Mike Purpura claimed the Democratic case for impeachment is based on assumptions.
In his public testimony, Ambassador Sondland used variations of the words assume, presume, guess, speculate, and belief over 30 times. Here are some examples.
That was my presumption, my personal presumption. That was my belief. That was my presumption, yeah. I said I presume that might have to be done in order to get the aid released. It was a presumption. I've been very clear as to when I was presuming, and I was presuming on the aid. It would be pure guesswork on my part, speculation. I don't know. That was the problem, Mr. Goldman. No one told me directly that the aid was tied to anything. I was presuming it was.
All the Democrats have to support the alleged link between security assistance and investigations is Ambassador Sondland's assumptions and presumptions.
During Saturday's opening argument, Trump's attorney, Pat Cipollone, accused the Democrats of attempting to overturn an election.
For all their talk about election interference, that they're here to perpetrate the most massive interference in an election in American history, and we can't allow that to happen. It would violate our Constitution. It would violate our history. It would violate our obligations to the future.
Trump's lawyers will continue their opening arguments today. On Friday, the Democratic House impeachment managers wrapped up their 3 days of opening arguments. This is Democratic Congress member Adam Schiff, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee.
But let's just try to step into someone else's shoes for a moment. Let's imagine it wasn't Joe Biden. Let's imagine it was any one of us. Let's imagine the most powerful person in the world was asking a foreign nation to conduct a sham investigation into one of us. What would we think about it then? Would we think that's good U.S. policy? Would we think he has every right to do it? Would we think that's a perfect call? It shouldn't have mattered that it was Marie Yovanovitch. It shouldn't matter that it was Joe Biden. Because I'll tell you something, the next time, it just may be you.
To talk more about the Senate impeachment trial, we're joined by Dan Friedman, reporter in Mother Jones' D.C. bureau, who focuses on foreign influence and national security. His recent piece is headlined, "Trump's legal team opened their impeachment defense with a blizzard of lies." And I want to go into that, Dan, but first, this latest news that has just been released over the last 24 hours, the New York Times saying that Bolton, in his book manuscript, has said that Trump directly told him that he was withholding military aid to Ukraine unless they would investigate the Bidens and as well. If you can talk about this, the significance of this.
Yeah, I think, a key argument that Trump's lawyers have made is that there is no evidence, as I think some of your clips showed, they have argued that there is no evidence indicating that Trump linked the hold on aid to Ukraine to his push for Ukraine to announce these investigations that would help him politically. And Trump has also said that the aid was not related to his wish for investigations. So Bolton's manuscript, as reported by the Times, completely blows up that claim. It falsifies the sort of key crux claim of their defense of him so far. So it's hard to overestimate how bad it is for Trump's defense. I would also point out that Mick Mulvaney, in public testimony, the White House chief of staff, in his press conference that he had back in October, also said that he had direct conversations with Trump, in which Trump linked the hold on aid to wanting Ukraine to announce investigations. So we shouldn't forget that also Mulvaney could be a witness connecting the push for aid to investigations. So the Senate is going to have an opportunity to vote on whether they want to subpoena Bolton, Mulvaney, and others. And obviously, the report from the Times makes that vote a lot harder from Republicans if they're going to try to continue to suppress this evidence.
So talk about what this means and what Republicans will see today will be as they're confronted with what Bolton is going to say, and then also address the issue of executive privilege that President Trump will try to make. And does that protect, is it a broad shield, or can that be challenged? And if Bolton himself, if subpoenaed, wants to testify, whether or not Trump invokes executive privilege, can he say what he wants?
I think the short answer is they can assert executive privilege. If the Senate subpoenas him, there is, for information that he has already reportedly put in the manuscript of a book that is going to be published for anyone to read. And of course, there's still a review process for that. But nevertheless, it is a very difficult argument for them to make. And I think ultimately it's a political question. So they can attempt to assert executive privilege, but with the Senate subpoena and Bolton wanting to testify, it's very difficult to suppress that information. The other point that I would make is Trump, in his tweet in which he denied that he had told Bolton that he wanted to hold the aid to force the investigations, is making the case for why Bolton should be subpoenaed. If Trump is saying Bolton is lying, that is a very strong argument for why Bolton should be put under oath under penalty of perjury and asked whether it is true that Trump made this connection. So, the Republicans are going to have a hard time keeping Bolton from testifying, and I'm sure that they'll try.
So, Dan, let's go to what happened on Saturday. The Democratic House managers wrapped up their arguments on Friday. Talk about the gist of what you call the blizzard of lies, what the Trump defense team said in their first day of arguments, and how little time they actually used.
Yeah, they did it all in just a few hours, and they managed to make a lot of claims that are false or deeply misleading. One of the claims, which was in the clips you played, was that there was no link established between the hold on aid and investigations by Ukraine. One problem with that we just talked about is that Bolton has now contradicted that. Another problem with that is that they simply ignored that there was testimony by Gordon Sondland, who they were quoting, linking a refusal to have a White House meeting with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky to trying to force him to have these investigations that would help Trump politically. So Sondland, elsewhere in his testimony, said there was a quid pro quo. Famously, it was a big deal. There was a quid pro quo. I am sure of that, linking a White House meeting to investigations. And Trump's lawyers didn't say, well, don't pay attention to that. It's not as important. They just literally ignored it. So I think that goes to sort of the veracity of their argument overall. Another argument they made is that the Ukrainians were not aware of the hold on aid until, I think, September. That also ignored public statements by the former deputy foreign minister from Ukraine, who said we did know about it, and also testimony by Laura Cooper, who's a Defense Department official, who said that she also heard the Ukrainians were concerned about the hold on aid back in July. In both cases, they're saying they knew about it in July. So those are, I think, two big examples, but there are a whole bunch of others. They said that there's they talked about the call that Trump had with Zelensky and repeatedly referred to it, the transcript of the call. I think anybody who's paid attention to that knows it's not actually a transcript. There may be important parts of that testimony, that conversation that are not included in that memorandum of the conversation. It's a summary of what people who were listening remember. So there was just a lot of false and misleading claims that to pick through if you were watching on Saturday.
Can you talk more about ABC News obtaining that recording of what appears to show President Trump saying that he wanted the then U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, fired after speaking at a private gathering that included Lev Parnas? Let me go to that. Let me go, before you respond, Dan, to that clip.
Germany's going behind our...
Germany's not doing
They're
that.
supporting Russia. They're supporting Russia.
You think so?
Oh,
I think so.
100%.
2 billion to pay Russia.
100%. 100%.
It just makes no sense.
It doesn't, exactly. It doesn't make
Poroshenko
sense.
needs support from you, President.
A lot of the European countries, they're backstabbing us basically and dealing with Russia, and that's why you're having such this. I think if you take a look, the biggest problem there, I think where we need to start is we got to get rid of the ambassador. She's still left over from the Clinton administration.
Where the ambassador, where Ukraine?
Yeah, and she's basically walking around telling everybody, wait, he's going to get impeached, just wait. I mean,
Really?
it's incredible. It's like,
She'll be gone tomorrow.
yeah, well,
What's her name?
I don't remember
I don't
the
have her
name.
name back.
So one of the things that will be, now that we have a Secretary of State that's been sworn in.
Get rid of her.
Hooray. One of the first
Okay,
things
get her out
that
tomorrow.
will,
I don't care. Get her out tomorrow. Take her out, okay?
Excellent.
Do it.
Excellent.
So that video was obtained from Lev Parnas' attorney, Joseph Bondi. It begins with Trump posing for photos, then entering a private dining room, and halfway through the recording, one of the participants suggests Yovanovitch is posing problems, and you can hear Trump saying, get rid of her, get her out tomorrow, I don't care, get her out tomorrow, take her out, okay, do it. And then the video, it's sort of showing the ceiling. But Dan, just explain this whole thing.
Yeah, I think number one, Parnas and the guy who took the video, Igor Fruman, are associates of Rudy Giuliani, and they were kind of running around Ukraine as Parnas claimed he was acting as an emissary of Giuliani, and then since Giuliani is Trump's personal lawyer, an emissary of Trump himself, attempting to effectuate this scheme to get Ukraine to have these investigations, and as part of that, excuse me, to get Marie Yovanovitch fired, the ambassador to Ukraine. President Trump has said that he doesn't know Lev Parnas or Igor Fruman. So I think quite clearly he is lying when he says he doesn't know them. Here's a video of them having a private meeting with him. And that's not all. There's pictures of them together on other occasions. I think another important point about this meeting, which occurred in May of 2018 at the Trump Hotel, is that Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman were there because they had pledged to give $1 million to a super PAC supporting Trump. They wound up giving a few weeks later $325,000 through a shell company that they set up in Delaware. So that is, I think, in many people's assessment, pretty corrupt, that they are able to influence U.S. policy toward Ukraine, which is in a war, of course, because they pledged $1 million to Trump's super PAC and gave $325,000. In addition, they have been indicted in Manhattan for campaign finance violations that include allegations that they accepted money from foreign sources, including an unnamed Russian businessman, and used that money to make campaign donations in the United States to influence the U.S. political system. So we don't know that this particular donation came from a foreign source, but we don't know that it didn't. And it certainly creates the suspicion that foreign interests for possibly someone in Ukraine who is concerned that Marie Yovanovitch was an ardent opponent of corruption and therefore was making it harder to do some kind of potentially corrupt business. A person like that could quite easily be influencing U.S. policy toward Ukraine through Parnas and Fruman in this case. And I think one thing it shows is that there is a lot more investigation to be done, whether it's by the House, by the Senate, by the Department of Justice, to figure out what was going on, particularly since these events occurred a year before, a little more than a year before most of the action that is at issue in the impeachment trial.
And finally, if you can just comment quickly in 30 seconds on what some have called the Epstein Dream Team, his team defending him being Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz.
Yeah, so Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz are both, of course, very famous lawyers, and I think that obviously the significant thing about Starr was that he oversaw the investigation into Bill Clinton's relationship with Monica Lewinsky and related issues. And Alan Dershowitz was a member of O.J. Simpson's Dream Team, who helped get him acquitted for murder. Both of them have previously made arguments that are departures from what they will presumably be arguing this afternoon. Dershowitz has said that you do not have to have committed a crime to be impeached. Today, Dershowitz has indicated that he will make the opposite argument. Ken Starr, who was forced out of a job at Baylor University because the football team had a sexual harassment scandal, will be arguing against Trump's removal from office as well. That's obviously inconsistent with Starr's position when he was going after Clinton. They will be, I think, really trying to make the case to the public, and I think it is worth keeping in mind that even though their legal arguments may be dubious, they are going to be trying to give Republican senators and Trump supporters something to hang their hat on in terms of saying he shouldn't be removed.
Well, Dan Friedman, I want to thank you for being with us. Reporter, Mother Jones' D.C. Bureau, focusing on foreign policy and national security, covering Trump's impeachment trial. We'll link to your piece. Trump's legal team opened their impeachment defense with a blizzard of lies. When we come back, basketball legend Kobe Bryant dies in a helicopter crash with his 13-year-old daughter and 7 others. We'll speak with The Nation's Dave Zirin and Fatima Gosgraves. Stay with us.